Welcome to the WDW News Today podcast. I'm Eric Morton. With me today, a very special guest, back by popular demand, none other than Mark Brickey of the Hey Brickey YouTube channel, a very popular Disneyland YouTuber, very high quality content. Give him a follow. Mark, welcome back.
It feels good to be back, and it felt great to get such a warm reception on our first conversation. And let's do it again, man. It was such a good time.
Let's do it. I mean, it's normally, so when Tom has been in Tokyo, we have Nicholas Cicero. He's been sitting in.
Yep.
Nick got bottled up a little bit this week.
Yep.
I'm sure that Nick will be back soon. And it's great that, it's fortuitous that you happen to be in town.
Yeah.
And there's no secret about it. You're in town for the reason a lot of people are in town, to check out Tiana's Bayou Adventure and some of the new things at EPCOT and all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to keep people talking nonstop about this attraction, but the reason I'm interested in your perspective is going to be because you're going to bring a little bit of a Disneyland perspective to it. Tom did mention in our review that he felt like this is going to be a better design for Disneyland, that this is designed for Disneyland.
Yeah.
And that might explain some of the open spaces people complain about.
Yeah, to me, it's a gradient, right? I mean, The attraction is exactly where New Orleans Square winds down and Critter Country begins.
Right.
Which feels a little displaced at Magic Kingdom.
Correct.
But back home, it's going to fit in there perfectly, and that would have always been my sneaky suspicion when they were really going on about like all the different critters that they were designing, and that they weren't following. It wasn't going to be a storybook ride, or a book report ride. They were going to do a new story.
Right.
And I started to get the idea early on. I'm like, oh, this is designed to solve the problem at Disneyland, and Magic Kingdom, unfortunately, is just going to get the scraps.
Yeah, we're going to have to figure that out here.
Yeah.
And I've seen there's a million complaints about the ride. And I share some of them.
Yeah.
But a common one is that the story's hard to follow, and I don't understand why people think. There's a backstory that's a little convoluted about her running a food co-op and salt domes, all that stuff. But the story is very simple, and I did watch your review, and you broke it down. It's a story in 3 acts.
Yeah.
Right?
Story in 3 acts. I mean, you're promised that you're going someplace. Mm-hmm. You go through the psychedelic second act, which I haven't seen the movie, so shrinking down was kind of crazy and wild. Yeah. And then the third act, you get to your final destination, and my major complaint would be, and I overall enjoyed it, but my major complaint would be is that it feels like a dark ride storyline put into a thrill ride system. And so there's not the same stakes that Splash had, but it just kind of feels like you're getting in a log and you're going out to eat dinner.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I think it's good, and our review generally was positive. Tom's review was more positive than mine, I would say. And I don't want to turn this episode of the podcast into a full review of Tiana's Bayou Adventure. I don't want to go over all these things again. I will say things that I think are important for me to discuss with you would be, while I like the ride, and I love some of those scenes, but especially with the critters and the band and all that stuff. Yeah. Number one, I felt like the band should be real loud when you're near the band, and I felt like it didn't. I don't know if there's an audio problem there. I feel like as you get closer to the band, the music never gets louder, and you just kind of go by, and they go, those guys can play. And that's a scene where there's a lot going on when you go by the band. And everything, you always go by there with a pretty good clip.
Yeah.
So you don't have a lot of time to take it in.
It is a fast ride.
And the finale scene, you go by there pretty quick.
Yeah. And
there are a lot of other parts of the ride where the logs get backed up or you're stuck there for a while and there's really nothing to see. Yeah. And those are I think, the problems that are operational in nature. They're still dialing in there. But for people that don't know, the old ride had the animatronic scenes were just kind of on a loop.
Yeah.
The thing is just happening and it just goes and goes and goes. And so if you were stuck there, it would just keep doing it. The new ones are activated by a sensor of some kind.
Yeah.
And so they don't do their thing until you get there. And sometimes the sensors are not registering that you're there. And so I did note that a few times where I was like, by the time I had ridden it 3 times, I'd seen every scene work properly. But I'm not sure I did a full ride through where everything worked properly on the same ride.
It's also interesting, too, where the characters are sort of in this, like, mode.
Right.
And then when your log hits that infrared sensor, it's like, that band's the bee's knees. Yeah. And then it kind of goes back in this chill zone.
They look like, remember in like the old fighting video games when they, like Street Fighter?
Yeah.
When they're waiting for
the command, they're just kind of sitting there like that. Yeah. That's funny.
No, it's great though. And I think what's more important is that we talk about Disneyland.
Sure.
Because I'll be the first to say that out of the 2 versions of Splash Mountain I've been on, Disneyland's was my least favorite.
Okay.
I didn't like the way that you're seated. I don't like sitting one behind one. I don't like sitting in ones, right? I like
the bobsled.
I'd rather sit there with the lap bar side by side.
Agreed.
And you have this, for those that don't know, at Disneyland, you kind of have just a little board that is your back.
Yeah.
You know, and then your legs and feet are touching the knees of the person in front of you, right? You're kind of straddling a human being in front of you with a board.
Like a little bit of pad in the back. It's not the best ride vehicle.
What I'll say is Disneyland's was scarier because if you're in the front, you're in the front.
Yeah.
Like Disney World, there's a little bit of like distance between you and the actual front of the log. If
like
you're at
hood.
Disneyland, you're like right there. You're like, man, I could go over the front of this thing.
Yeah, it feels like it's the easiest ride to get out of if you ever wanted to just jump out of the thing. And I do agree with you. The riding in tandem is so much more fun than riding like the bobsled style method. And the first time I rode Splash out here, I was amazed at the showrooms are so much bigger and it was so much brighter. Disneyland's ride has always been very dark with its lighting.
Yeah, but very condensed, which I think is good in some ways.
Yeah.
If you're trying to stretch a budget in particular to try to get as much into the scenery as you can. Also, I don't know why they called it Splash Mountain at Disneyland because it was more like a wall of water comes over the side of your boat and you're completely drenched.
Yeah.
Disneyland's is, I literally had just not a splash, just a wall of water come over the side of the boat.
Yeah.
And like get everybody wet. Like it's a little wild. Some people like that. It was 55 degrees the day I was there. I didn't love it. Right, ruined my jeans.
Yeah, we don't have the Splash Mountain or Tiana's Bayou Adventure weather all year long.
Right.
So, Splash for a greater part of the year is a 5-minute walk on.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see December, holidays, January, when people are coming in from out of town. What does a new log ride do when it's, 50 degrees outside?
Right. Well, I think people should make up their minds when they ride it. I think watching POV footage was a disservice to me. It's hard to watch. It's kind of like you ever watch a concert from someone's like iPhone, and you don't get that full feeling of like being in a venue and feeling the sounds and the sights and the energy and the vibe. And I feel like while a POV video is helpful, I don't think that that's a good way to make your judgment on the ride. Look, I've said it. I got criticized for it. Most people decided what they felt. Most people who don't like this ride decided they didn't like the ride about 3 years ago.
Agreed. As soon as that concept art showed up in 2020, most people had a decision which way they were going to go. And that's why it was so important for me to come out here this week.
Yeah.
I didn't watch the Disney POV. I didn't watch any of my peers review it. I wanted to go to Walt Disney World, go to the Magic Kingdom, get in that log, ride it, experience it firsthand. Because what you don't get from a POV is that rush. You don't get that excitement that is doing the drop, getting wet, having fun with all your friends. That doesn't come through the POV, and that is an essential part of the ride experience.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't want to get too deep into this, but because I've discussed at length with Tom some of these changes that we have been introduced to in the last week, whether it's cruise line, whether it's EPCOT, but you being a person who is from a design background, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Communicore Hall.
So that's next on my list.
Yeah.
And this will be my first ever EPCOT journey where there are no walls up. So I'll be excited about that. I don't know. This is going to be one of those things where it's kind of hard to look at what you got because you remember what you didn't get.
Right.
And was it 17 or 19 when they showed us the transformation of EPCOT at D23? My mind blurs those two together. I think it was 19.
It's 19.
That leaf-shaped building that didn't get built, that was my favorite thing that I saw because that building to me symbolized Disney getting back to the greatness that is Disney, where architecture and art and sort of a high society view of the world and what the future could look like was all embodied in that one structure. And that was one of the first things that got cut.
You talk about the 3-story or whatever.
Yeah. And when that got removed, I was like, oh, man, just when we were getting ready to go to what Disney does best, they pulled the budget out on that one. So it's going to be hard to kind of judge it when I had my heart set on that thing. But so far, the interior of the area where it looks like an urban plaza. I didn't mind it. I kind of enjoyed it. But what I tell you what I like about what they've done so far to the interior, when budgets prevail and there's an interest level there, none of that's going to be hard to remove and take out.
Right.
So I feel like a lot with like Galaxy's Edge, it's a wait and see. There's something better that will come there. I don't think it'll happen in the next 5 years.
It's like a soundstage, but for events. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like a blank canvas. I get it. You know, when they had that model in the Odyssey, they had a projection map model of all the things coming to Epcot. Let's see, what were we getting? Harmonious, gone. Mary Poppins ride, budget cut. Play Pavilion, gone.
Yeah.
That festival celebration building,
Yes.
or whatever they were calling it, gone. This is what's left, right? We got Moana, Journey of Water, inspired by Moana. That did happen, and I think most people have agreed that it's pretty good for what it is. Nobody's coming to Epcot to experience that.
No.
But things for little kids, the Encanto shows for little kids, you know, some of these things they're doing are for little kids. But look at all the things we didn't get, just of the things that we were told we were getting.
I know. And when you saw that concept artwork, that bird's eye view of Future World, and you know the purple sidewalk leading this direction, the gold sidewalk over there, like, it was just such beautiful concept art. It really felt like Disney was getting to where I think it was hitting at all cylinders. And then, you know, the world kind of changed and budgets changed and audience needs changed. So there's a lot of things that we'll look at for the next decade that will sort of be bizarro souvenirs from 2020. And Future World is definitely going to be one of those.
Yeah, and for instance, concept art is one of those things where you're never quite sure what it is. Someone might be given a half hour, you know, an artist given 3 hours. Hey, we need to present concept art for a new idea, and they might just recycle a bunch of stuff they already had. What comes to mind is the DisneylandForward project. The first time they announced it, when they were talking about the sort of park on the other side of the Disneyland Hotel and Paradise Pier Hotel, Pixar Place Hotel.
Yeah.
And you're recognizing things in there. You're like, I've seen this thing before.
Yeah.
That looks like a ride from Shanghai.
Yeah.
That looks like something from Pandora, World of Avatar. You know, and I think sometimes those things just get put in there to create, like, here's the space we're trying to fill. Give them an idea of what this looks like when stuff is in it. Never mind what the stuff is. And then, so a person like me, I see concept art, my eyes kind of glaze over. Everything looks fuzzy. It looks like a smeared Thomas Kincaid painting to me sometimes.
That's a great way to put it.
Where Tom is one of those people who looks in and goes, oh, that's this thing from here. Oh, look, that's, you know, you can see this ride from Shanghai. Oh, look, there's Zootopia. And I'm like, where? I remember as a kid looking at those 3D pictures in the mall.
Where you step back and then you see the unicorn?
And I never once saw it.
I couldn't get it either.
Was it the movie Mallrats, wasn't it, where the guy stared at it all? I never once saw any of those.
Yeah, I could never see it, so it always made that magic trick not so much fun for me.
Yeah, so sometimes it's like that, right? You have to look at the concept art a certain way to see the things you want to see, and sometimes it's just, hey, relax, it's concept art. Sometimes there's something in there you can really dig your teeth into.
Yeah, I kind of think the difference, though, is that Epcot concept art was at D23, and they're breaking down things and how it's going to come together. And the DisneylandForward one was always like, this is something like what we could do.
Right.
And you're right, there was a lot of copy and paste that was put in there.
Yeah.
And fans that jumped in to try to decipher what it all was, I always had the attitude of, you're wasting your time, because they clearly just took artwork that they already had and kind of populated it with ideas of what could be, because you would never, ever reveal that in a local media press release. Right. That's on stage at the Honda Center with, 15,000 fans all there to celebrate. So you get that big media pop.
You're right, because the Epcot one was real.
Yeah.
Right? The Epcot one, they put that model with the projection mapping on there, and they had a show on a loop telling you what you were getting.
Yeah.
And so much that we didn't get.
Yeah.
And there's a million reasons why.
Sure.
Some of it, maybe it was a bad concept. Some of it, there were layoffs at WDI. Some of it is they're just like, we didn't realize how much this was going to cost us. There's other things that we've been promised before that never happened. May 26th of 2020, they were supposed to close Spaceship Earth and redo it. Nobody's talking about that anymore. And that ride sorely needs it.
Yeah, yeah.
The ride sorely needs it. So they didn't do anything there. What they are doing is test track. So within a week or so, Test Track will be shutting down, and they'll be launching a new version of that. So we got a bunch of stuff taken away, but we're getting a few things that we weren't sure we were going to get.
It's insane, though, when you think about when that EPCOT artwork was shown to us in late summer or early fall of 2019. Mm-hmm. Think about how different your life is 5 years later.
Right.
Think about how different Disney parks are 5 years later. Yeah. Like the world has changed 50 years in the last 5 years. And that promise of EPCOT is one of them. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but Spaceship Earth is the last original holdout from the front of the park, right?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
So they had Listen to the Land. It's now Living with the Land.
Yeah.
It is substantially similar to what it used to be, but is not identical to what it used to be. The Living Seas is now the Seas with Nemo and Friends. It is similar to what it was, but the pavilion is largely the same, but the attraction is different. Obviously, everything on that east side, Universe of Energy, gone. Wonders of Life, gone. Horizons, gone. World of Motion, gone. Right? All those things are just gone. And replaced with some things that are not at all similar to what they were.
Right.
At least on the west side, they replaced. And Imagination is in its third iteration. Right. The best one was first. The second one was terrible. And what we have now is kind of like, I think people thought, well, it's better than the second version. It's not what we want, but it's better. And it's still called, it still has Journey into Imagination in the title somewhere.
Yeah.
So that side of the park, you could say the west side. Of Future World, the attractions they bear a lot of resemblance to their original counterparts, even though they're not the same.
Yeah, the thing that was really confusing for me the first time I came out here was doing a Figment.
Right.
And yeah, I see the hype. I know people love them, and the only version I ever rode was the third iteration. And I was like, I don't get it. Like,
it's not great.
Orange Bird, I get. Orange Bird's sick. Like, Orange Bird is like the most perfect illustrated character. And when I went and rode that ride, I'm like, now I'm even more confused about Figment and who he is and why everybody loves him.
Did you hear the Orange Bird song in the music loop when you went to the drone show?
That Orange Bird song got me just so happy. And I'm like, is this new? Has this always existed? It's a Sherman Brothers piece, huh?
Well, it's performed by, I just went blank on her name. And she kind of got... I kind of canceled for sort of some derogatory things she'd said about certain groups, and you don't hear that song a lot anymore. But I was like, it starts playing, and I'm not familiar enough with it to catch it the first two notes, and Tom's like, oh my God, listen to what they're playing.
Yeah.
But you're right, the Journey into Imagination with Figment is not a great attraction. But people were willing to accept it because of how bad the second iteration was. And everybody... has their fingers crossed that D23 they're going to announce that they're redoing Imagination again.
I mean, here's the interesting thing about D23 and where Disney's at. Everybody is, Epic Universe. As of time we were recording this, the preview center just opened up today. Right. And everybody is anticipating, or a lot of people, a lot of fans think, well, theme park battles theme park, and Disney has to open up a new theme park to battle Epic Universe. And from a design perspective and from a business perspective, I think that if Disney over the next couple of years, Epic Universe will obviously get a lot of business, but I think over the next couple of years, the way that they could combat that is a new land here, a new major attraction there, and I think that gets people spreading out their vacation days again.
Yeah, I think so too. I do think Epic Universe will put a dent in them for a little while, but I think it's going to be a short-term bump, and I think both companies are probably going to get a bump out of this, right?
Yeah.
More tourism in Central Florida. I think someone who's been going on Disney vacations for years is probably still going to go on Disney vacations with their families. They might take an extra day at Universal or they might not. And people talk about building a fifth gate, but the reality is the average family is going to go somewhere for like a week. Unless they're coming from like the UK or somewhere in Europe, they're coming for like a week.
Yeah.
Right? So you're like 4 theme parks, a couple water parks, resort pools, I'm good. Or maybe I'll zip to Universal for one day. I don't know that's going to put a giant dent in Disney, and it may, in the long run, help everybody.
I think it will put competition in the marketplace. Yeah. I think we'll see something big happen. Hollywood Studios need some help. Magic Kingdom needs some help. Epcot needs they all could kind of use a little bit of help. But also, let's not forget that this is going to affect Universal, too. Yeah. When people come out here and they only have so many days, Islands of Adventure is long in the tooth. Universal is going to lose a little bit of their business because people are going to be going to their new park and not consuming their older parks.
Sure. I mean, people only have so much time and so much money. I think Universal is probably going to do some sort of promotional things where with their tickets, you'll have to, if you want to go to Epic Universe the first several months, maybe you have to get a 2-day ticket where one of them's to one of the other parks.
Yeah.
Something like that seems like it'd be smart. Disney doesn't have to build a new park. They just have to give people reasons to come to their parks.
Exactly.
So the Beyond Big Thunder Mountain project, is that what are we calling it? Beyond Big Thunder Mountain?
Yeah, that's kind of the word on the street.
Yeah, back there, that project, something's going to happen there, right? Something's obviously happening at Animal Kingdom.
Yep, that one seems on the table.
Epcot, we're kind of mopping up, right? There will be some little refurb here and there at Epcot, but for the most part, the transformation of Epcot is complete.
It's what it is for a while.
Right.
It'll be fascinating to see how all this plays out. And one of the things that I take from all of this, which is kind of fascinating if you look at it, the modern theme park land is hyper-focused on one IP. You go into one land and it's no longer Fantasyland where it's a bunch of stories that are in a similar tone. It's Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, 2 attractions. It's Avengers Hallway, 1.5 attractions.
Utopia.
Yeah. So all of this starts in the most bizarre space, Toontown in Disneyland.
Yeah.
Because Toontown has the portal where you got to go underneath the railroad. When you go into Toontown, world gets small, then it gets big again. It had 2 attractions. It was all themed around one central IP, the Fab Five. And when we look at theme park design in the last 2 decades and where it's going, it's Toontown is sort of the beginning of this new way of theme park
Toontown plus
design.
Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
I love the backstory of Toontown. That's actually where all the cartoons live.
Yeah.
And then they come work and they commute to Disney to work, kind of like.
Well, it goes even further because Walt would hang out with Mickey in Toontown.
Right.
And loved that part of California and asked Mickey, he's like, would it be cool if I built my theme park here? And they're like, yeah, just don't give up the secret of our spot. Yeah. So the way that he even discovered the land of Anaheim and the Orange Groves was hanging out with Mickey in Toontown. So I love that it predates Disneyland. It's such a wild story. Forever. It's such a wild story. But it's funny to think about, like, that is the origin of the new design template. That's Radiator Springs. That's Galaxy's Edge. That's Avatar.
Right. And it's even kind of what Universal's doing.
100%.
For the most part, they have the How to Train Your Dragon land. They're going to have a 3rd Harry Potter land. They have Dark Universe, which is kind of like monsters and all that kind of stuff. They have, I'm going blank here. They have Nintendo. The Celestial Park and they have Super Nintendo World. Yeah. Right. So you're right. It's not video game land, right? It's Super Nintendo World.
Yeah.
It's not movies about magical stuff. It's not Magical Land. It's Harry Potter Land, Ministry of Magic.
Yeah.
So they're drilling into these things, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm here for it. I'm happy that it's going to be, as a local.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to have another thing to do.
For sure. And I mean, the idea though of the portal land, where you funnel everybody in so you can reset their expectations. And then when you're in there, everything is stylistically under one style guide. Right. I like that. I like seeing how far they can push it. And, as somebody who's obviously been following this because I'm a theme park design enthusiast, the thing that I was least excited about was How to Train Your Dragon. I don't know anything about that. Cool. It slowly is becoming like, but what about that How to Train Your Dragon land? Like, it looks pretty sick in there, And if I'm not mistaken, I think maybe the Super Nintendo area has a portal in the portal to reset your expectations from Super Mario Brothers to go over to the Donkey Kong area. I almost think that there's some sort of like resetting of your expectations.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I haven't dove that deep. Other people, obviously, in the organization have. I haven't dove that deep in. But I know what the attractions are going to be or what they are said to be. And it looks pretty cool, and we'll see. I think that if you think this is Universal laying the smack down and like this is their checkmate to Disney, I think that's a very naive view of this situation.
Agreed.
I think these are very nuanced things. It's fluid and they move, and people are cautious about how they react to things, because I think the dumbest thing you could do is overreact right now. If you're Disney. Disney does have some sort of new development agreement in place that authorizes a fifth gate, but it's not really a full fifth gate. You have much more exciting stuff, I think, happening in California, and they're not really competing with Universal there. Sure, Knott's takes a chunk out of them a little bit, but I mean, Disney's kind of just competing with the fact that there's only 2 days worth of stuff to do when you go there.
Yeah, I mean, the idea for the Disneyland Resort is how do you get a family to go there for a week or 5 days? Right. And I think in the short term, it's going to be to make both of the parks overwhelming so that they feel like you can't get through them. And in the long term, we'll see a third gate show up. But, the theme park fan, the naive theme park fan, because there's a lot of ones that are so brilliant that I'll do a video where I've went deep and they go deeper than me or they have such amazing ideas. But the naive fan thinks of it as a war. And what's Disney going to do? What's Disney going to do? I'm like, well, they're going to probably do what they've always done. They're going to sit back, watch the results, do a big study, and then ultimately make a decision. Like Wizarding World Harry Potter comes out, and then Galaxy's Edge doesn't show up for years later. Right. It wasn't like they rushed to get it out the very next summer. They looked at Harry Potter and Wizarding World, thought about it, percolated, kind of hired some of that staff, and then did their own spin at something that immersive in design.
I also like to look at it like this. When Universal was investing in Harry Potter, Disney was investing in a lot of infrastructure and backend.
Yeah.
Disney was investing in much better Wi-Fi experience through the parks, much better cell phone service through the parks, Magic Band integration to everything. And now that's really paying off for them. Like, as much as I hate all that stuff, I don't hate having good cell phone signal, but I hate, Magic Band and having to bang the app all day long and all. That's where things are going. And they have a better infrastructure for that kind of stuff than Universal does. Universal Volcano Bay, they did that with the wristbands. I forget what the bands are called. Someone in the comments, I'm sure, can tell us. But that's
called lava leashes.
Right, lava leashes. That's great. It's good stuff. But Disney, I think, during that time period, they were making a lot of investments. So those investments have resulted in a lot of revenue for the company. But it's sort of invisible to someone who's just saying, Universal smart, Disney dumb, or Disney dumb, Disney smart, Universal dumb. I don't think if you talk to either of those companies that they regret building a park in Florida, or that I don't think Disney even regrets that Universal built parks in Florida. I think it's good for everybody. We are now like the center of the theme park tourism world.
Oh, it's wild when you come here as an out-of-towner. Everything looks inviting and fun. And infrastructure is not sexy, but it does bind and bring everything together. So, you're right. They were working on the back-end stuff that nobody cares about. But if you think about, I forgot something. Let me just hold my wrist up to my hotel room. Let me grab my camera. Let me get into the park. Oh, let me put my wrist up. I mean, I'm always floored how easy it is to get into the Florida parks. I mean, getting into Disneyland's like breaking into Fort Knox. Going to any of the parks out here, you just stroll on in. It's such a better experience.
I remember as recently as like 2010, probably going to Disneyland, and my ticket was still a piece of paper.
Yeah.
It had a magnetic strip on it, but it was essentially like a thicker stock piece of paper. And I was staying at the Disneyland Hotel. I used it for everything. I used it as a credit card, and it's a piece of paper. And at least here we had the annual passes that were like a thicker plasticky thing, and now we have real thick plastic plus a phone. And I use my Apple Watch, but other people use Magic Bands to get in places. And I think that's been good for Disney, because not only are they make it easier for you to spend money, but you spend money to buy the things that make it easy. You're spending $45 on a Magic Band Plus, and now they're starting to interact with things around the parks. I think, I don't love as a guest Magic Band Plus all that much. But there are people that do, and it's certainly been good for the company.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when mobile food ordering came out, it was horrible because you had to wait for a window to open, and then you said, I'm here. And then you had to wait for them to make your food.
Right.
And then you had to wait in line to get the food. I'm like, okay, so where I used to stand in one line, now I stand in three. But I have to admit, over the last 12 months, it's gotten extremely efficient. And that's just one of those things. Like, it wasn't fun. It wasn't sexy. It didn't sell theme park tickets. But now when I'm in the parks, I would never go up to stand up or stand by. Yeah. I would always do the mobile order because it's just changed life so much. But these things, they're kind of slow and in the background, and you don't think about them until one day you go, oh wow, look at all the different technology that enhances my experience.
I mean, you look at it, technology. Disney has a problem with technology.
Yeah,
and in some areas they were at the forefront, but they have all these sort of disparate systems that have been under different umbrellas for decades in some cases, and they're trying to integrate all of that, and the app is still kind of clunky. I mean, I love when you log into the app, you're like, I need to make a park reservation. Let me log into the app. And it goes, boop. Good news, you have an account with us. Like, yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Like, great. Yeah. But I've told this story on here before. I remember when I was trying to book a room on Galactic Star Cruiser. Not for me, but for the company.
Yeah.
Because I'm one of the only people in the company that hasn't been on the Galactic.
You didn't Star Cruise?
No. Wow. I'm not bitter about it, though. It's cool. Or been to Japan, or been to France. Anyway, when someone answered the phone, they were verifying my information. And everything they have of me is old. An old address, an old email address, an old phone number. All these things. I don't even know how they found me. I guess I just spelled my name enough times or something. They figured it out. And you realize, the hotels, that's when I was like a DVC member and I lived in Tampa. And I know that they have my updated information because they just mailed me a magnet at my current house.
Yeah.
And they sent me a verification text to my current phone number, and they mail stuff to me all the time. And they send me emails. So literally their hotel group didn't have the same information that that the rest of the app had, and I'm sure there's many other cruise line probably the same deal. And now they are kind of loosely connected with this my.disney.com, but it's not perfect, right? Because if I want to log into something and I use my my.disney.com, well, our household, Lee, the Disney Plus account is under her name.
Yeah.
So now I don't want to log into my.disney.com and then log out so I can log into Disney Plus under her account.
Yeah.
There's a lot of these sort of things they have there's a lot of data validation that has to happen on Disney's side, and that can take years and years and years. And they have made very big improvements very quickly, but it's still a problem, man.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Disney is it's a 100-year-old company that grew organically in one spot and just spread like vines to where it's at 100 years later. And so it's a mini government, and one hand doesn't always know what the other hand's doing.
It's very common in big organizations.
For sure, and especially for one that's been around so long where, this didn't exist before that exists, and do we need to bring these two departments together? Do we keep them separate? So, there's a lot of things that kind of move slow and isn't really exciting. And, when DisneylandForward, that's now been approved back home in Disneyland, and the first big thing they're going to do is parking. Yeah. They're going to build parking garages first, which is not going to excite people. It's hard to get excited about a parking garage, but you have to give the cars a home so that you can release other land for a theme park. Right. And so it'll be interesting to see how people respond to this thing that Disney's kind of try to downplay, like, it's going to be a big thing, but it's a 30-year plan. But, the other thing about parking garages being built is they're disruptive when they're being built. Yeah. They close up streets. Yeah, it's going to be the worst thing ever until you realize, because we now have 35,000 parking spots between three massive parking garages, one that's going to be one of the biggest parking garages in the world. Now we can release this land and do fun stuff like something similar to Fantasy Springs on the other side of Disneyland. Right. Finally take over the dumb transportation center and make that a part of Disney's California Adventure and fully make it a full-day park,
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think in California, Disney's going to experience some of the same pains that Universal is going to have with Epic, which is connecting some of these places that are currently not contiguous pieces of land.
Yeah.
Right? So it'll be interesting to see what the transportation solutions are going to be if they build that, third gate over in the toy store where the Toy Story lot is, or however they plan on doing that. Just endless moving sidewalks. I don't know.
But that's the fun part of Disneyland Forward, and why I love Disneyland as a designer, is out here there's land for days. What, they're only using like 35% of the overall footprint that Walt bought back in the day?
Sounds about right.
So in Disneyland, it's that tile game that you had when you were a kid. You know, you're trying to make the tiger face, but you know, you got the eyes together, but you got to get the nose, but it's in the bottom corner, and you're just moving these tiles around. And that is exactly how Disneyland is. So to figure out how to get a new park, you also have to destroy a city road. Do we put a tunnel in? Do we put a bridge up? Do we do transportation? Like, how far can people walk until it's too far? It's fascinating, and I love just seeing how all the pieces come together.
I would like to sign the petition to just level Tomorrowland at Disneyland and start over.
I mean, this is where they're stuck. Space Mountain is a hit.
Yeah.
It's a perennial favorite, and they accidentally put it dead center in the land.
In a terrible spot.
So if Space Mountain was all the way to the left, all the way to the right, then they could just cut a lot of it off and reboot. But your number one winner is dead center.
Yeah.
That creates so much problems on how to like keep it and redo it. Tomorrowland and Disneyland is a disaster. And it's funny because in 67, when they built that, that was a rehearsal for building the Magic Kingdom.
Tell me more.
So that's the first ever Disney Utilidor. We only have two. Mm-hmm. They built them there to be like, will this work when we do Magic Kingdom? Walt was still alive, so the People Mover was a trial for if EPCOT was going to really be like a full city. And all of the design that they did in 67 Tomorrowland was a lot of different things. That these are ideas that we want to implement with the Florida project. Let's try them here in one land, and if it works in one land, then it'll pass the Disney test to do an entire theme park that way.
I think that's a really interesting observation. Like a live rehearsal.
Yeah.
For will this work?
Yeah.
When we go to Florida.
Well, keep in mind when they dredged out the Seven Seas Lagoon and then put all that soil so they could have the second floor for Magic Kingdom, that was a huge gamble to see if it worked. And then when they would do EPCOT 11 years later, it's already way too expensive to do that. That's why EPCOT has like an 8-acre like basement.
Right.
But Magic Kingdom, the whole thing's on a second floor. And just in 11 years with inflation, they're like, oh, we cannot do that again.
They were also, EPCOT, I believe at the time, was like the largest construction project in the world or something like that. It was a massive undertaking. I'm sure like the budget was tight. They had to adjust on the fly. There's all kinds of rumors about where sinkholes popped up where they weren't expected to be, and building in Florida can be quite a challenge.
Yeah, from what I've come to research is the body of water is the shape that it is because there's some massive sinkholes. We're like, we'll just expand the lagoon out a little bit further because we can't build on top of that. But the same construction group that did the World Trade Center in New York City was the same construction group that did EPCOT.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were people that were top tier, could take on, huge projects like that. But yeah, I mean, Disneyland was built in a year. The fact that they got EPCOT done in 3 years is still pretty impressive to me.
Considering it took us 5 years to build a roller coaster.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at Google Satellite, because I use a lot of my videos, they still have Tron in dirt.
Yeah.
I'm like, we're going to update this,
my neighborhood,
guys.
too, still in dirt. Yeah, no, that's crazy. I remember looking, this goes back to when Seven Dwarfs Mine Train was going to be announced and new Fantasyland stuff. I remember like looking at Google Maps and Google Earth back in the day, or this is many years ago now. I mean, like, where are they putting it?
Yeah.
I think I was convinced it was going to be like across the street, like where, east of where Tron is now. I think I was convinced it was going to be there. I didn't realize that, they really did have the space to do a roller coaster there. Roller coasters don't actually take up that much space unless you put a big gravity building in.
Yeah, and with the tight turns and stuff, they can sit in a pretty. I mean, when you look at the Matterhorn from above, it's not that big considering it's housing 2 roller coasters inside of it and has its exterior candy shell, right? Like you have to have a little space between where the people are riding and the outer part of it. So
I like those problem-solving exercises though, where they're like, we don't have much space, so why don't we have the Skyway go through the Matterhorn while there's 2 roller coasters going through there? I think those kind of things are really interesting. Disneyland is built in these sort of layers that I really like. Again, I said in my review of Tiana's Bayou Adventure, though, is like when I go to Horror Nights, I know you're not a Horror Nights guy.
No.
my favorite houses inevitably are the ones that are in the big sound stages. And people are like, oh, but like think of all the creative ideas they came up with to put it in this, like they have these sort of semi-permanent tents that some of the houses are in. They're large, but it's like, yeah, but they had to put so much creative energy into how to fit this there that it didn't get to set their mind free to imagine like how big and awesome could I make this thing. But there's something to be said for the problem solving in building Disneyland in these layers. Sometimes it's a problem, and that's probably why Tomorrowland is such a problem.
Yeah.
Because the people mover goes through so many buildings.
Yeah. I mean, it's interwoven between every single building in Tomorrowland. And from what I've heard, different opinions here and there, but it's support bearing, the way that it goes in and out of everything. So essentially to pull that out, you have to take the whole thing apart. But the two terms that I talk about a lot on my channel is creative problem solving and then also design within constraint.
Yeah.
Because Disneyland is never blue sky. It is always, okay, here's the idea, but here's the footprint that we have. And sometimes with Galaxy's Edge, like they perfectly massage that in that backstage area, but Avengers Hallway, not so much. So, sometimes it works in their favor, sometimes it doesn't. But I always try to consider what were the odds that the design team was against to do this magic trick, which is fitting everything inside of Anaheim.
Yeah, and I think that's, going back to Epic Universe, going to be interesting because Universal really has a lot of space out there. They
And
can
a clean
do a
slate.
lot of things, a clean slate. They've done some good things with the small amount of land they have, where their two parks are now, well, three if you count the water park and all the resorts. And the little sunken canals you don't even see from street level with boats and walkways and people going from one resort to the other. But that all started with Universal Studios Florida, which is very small, frankly, not a very good theme park. There's some really charming stuff about that park that I love, but it's, the Harry Potter area is nice, and there's a bunch of stuff that could be at any theme park in America, kind of. And but they've turned it into something special with the way that they have used their small land that they have and really built some interesting stuff that you probably don't even see unless you stay at one of their hotels. Because I'm talking about the walkways and the waterways and the boat transport and all these things that are really interesting and make the property a lot nicer than it used to be. And Islands of Adventure, they took some big risks there, and I mean that's a really good theme park. But Epic, they don't have to work around a lot of these design problems, right? Unless logistically they're going to have to work on their transportation, how to get people to go to all of their parks. But I think like in terms of setting your imagination free to design a theme park, I mean, it's Roller Coaster Tycoon out there.
Yeah, I have a question about the layout of Epic Universe that time will tell. So they have a hotel that's actually inside of the theme park.
Right.
And my curiosity is, where does the hotel access stop and the theme park access begins? Like there's obviously like a oversized patio out front, but it almost, and I could be wrong on this, but it almost feels like the Celestial Park, like the grand entryway. Yeah. It almost feels like that's one idea, and then the portals to the lands is another idea. So I'm almost curious, will the portals close at night, but if you're staying at the hotel, you can enjoy that entire area through there?
I don't think so. I think it's going to be like, Disneyland Paris, you can go in underneath the Disneyland Hotel, right?
Yeah.
Fantasy Springs has a private entrance to Fantasy Springs from the Fantasy Springs
I used your
Hotel.
photos in my latest video.
They have also at Tokyo Disney Sea, the Hotel Miracosta is in the theme park, right? You can have rooms where your window overlooks the lagoon shows and stuff like that. So those are in there, but they can still restrict access because your actual park entrance, I think it's, takes place under an overhang. I mean, you have Disney California Adventure has a hotel that connects.
Yeah,
you
Grand
can enter
California.
from the Grand Californian to DCA. It's the same type of thing, I think.
Yeah. What I would be intrigued about staying in one of those hotels is, the view for the show, whatever. Yeah. But I want to look out my window at 3 a.m. and see work lights on. I want to see trucks going down the street and doing things. And I was talking to a Disneyland security guard one night, and he came up to me, he was talking to me and watched the channel, super nice guy. And I said, what do you guys do on the overnight shift? Like, what is the big thing you do? And he told me this thing that just made me love the parks even more. He goes, well, the main thing that we do, other than, your basic security things.
Making rounds. Yeah.
He's like, but the main thing that we do is whenever we have work teams in, we have this little stick with like a mirror on the bottom of it. And we walk up to the work trucks and we do a quick check to make sure that they have a mat underneath their trucks.
It's a big deal.
As soon as they come in, they're given a mat that has to be under the truck when it's parked. And he just looks at me straight eyes and goes, "This is Disneyland. We can't have an oil stain on Main Street." And I go, "No, you can't." And I love that that's being policed literally every night, where guys are walking around being like, "Hey man, you got to have your spill mat underneath your work truck."
Oh yeah, it's a big deal.
I love that.
I managed a group that did a bunch of work on the network overhaul of all of Walt Disney World back in 2012, 2013. And that was huge. You're getting kicked out of the park. You're not working that. If you don't have mat underneath your truck, you're out.
But that kind of attention to detail and policing it and understanding, we can't have an oil stain in New Orleans Square. We can't have one on Main Street. Like, that doesn't exist here because this world is quote unquote perfect. I love that, like, eye to design and problem solving.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that they protect what they've created, right?
Yeah.
It's not always the companies are not always perfect in this regard. They stray from their North Star sometimes. But I think I love that there are people that are like, no, we got to protect this thing. This thing is precious.
Yeah.
Right? What we built here is special. And so I know that I went off recently about another light pole falling at Disneyland. I'm like, no, other people built this. It might seem like a boring job that you have to protect it, right? You don't, you know, but this is a legacy going back. Millions of people have walked through these gates with the same expectation, which is they take care of this place with impeccable detail. And if you let it slip on your watch, they're going to let you know. And I like that. I don't know why they can't keep a light fixture from falling over. But hopefully that gets fixed.
Yeah, I mean, do you go through and test every single one of them? And what is the light fixture test? Like, I love thinking about stuff like that logistically.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
When the light fell over in Town Square, our photographers could see rust. The inside of it was just crumbling rust. There's those little access panels. They could probably just go in there and look around, I guess. I don't know. I'm just saying, I think you take for granted that you're in a very safe place.
100%.
Nothing bad is going to happen to you at Disneyland, right? Disneyland is your bubble. You go through a fairly strong security checkpoint, right? You go in there and you're in a place that is perfectly maintained at all times. And people care about these things. People care about a spot of oil on the ground. People care about peeling paint sometimes. I used to think that like an army of elves came out in the middle of the night at Magic Kingdom and touched up the paint on every building,
Yeah.
You would see things like that. You would, like Tom and I have talked about, if you grew up when we grew up, you have every reason to believe that they can do anything.
Yeah.
Right? And so, it sounds stupid and small, but they don't want oil on the ground in their park.
And you bring up a good point, too, where the illusion of the magic is so well done and curated all around you that it is a place where people let their guard down.
Right.
And, there's been a couple of moments where, over the last couple of years, people have acted a little bit wild and some things have gotten into the park. Mm-hmm. And there's just part of your brain that goes, I would have thought if you would ask me yesterday, is it possible to do that? You'd been like, no, but sometimes it does happen. So it is an interesting thing where, because it's been around so long, it has to adapt and reflect its consumer of the times.
Yeah.
And as society changes, the parks change, and it's a living, breathing thing, and that's part of the excitement and what makes it fun. Even though it feels like it's not part of our world, it actually is.
I think the last time we discussed that, right? How long it took security to get there when there was that fight in Toontown, and everyone's like, I would have assumed people were fast roping out of helicopters to stop them.
A guy comes out of a bush.
Yeah. So that, illusion broken. But I don't like. The one thing I don't like about this job is it does open your eyes a little bit to the things that they can't do or that they do not do well.
Yeah.
And I would much rather have the illusion that everything is perfect and I do everything. Well, but I try to focus on the positive.
Well, you and I have done that dangerous thing where when you really love something and that passion becomes a pursuit, when you get too close to something, it can really change your relationship with it and the way that you see it. So I try to be honest with my reporting and try to say things the way that they are, but I also try to still take time to enjoy the magic, Remember why I got into all of this. And even though it's not perfect and it's rough around the edges and it has this long history and sometimes it was better and sometimes it was worse, still is a pretty great place. And if you just step back and look at it and think about that compared to all the other places in your life, the magic's real. You just got to take the time to look for it,
You don't know it, but at some point it was like the Matrix, and they offered you the red pill or the blue pill.
Yeah.
And you took the blue pill because you were, wanting to see more.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you see more, you're like, oh, I wish I had seen less.
Yeah. And, I love talking to people that work for the company at different levels. And I always kind of ask, so, obviously it was fandom and a love for this brought you into this. Does that still exist? Is that still in there? And everybody I talk to from all different levels, they still love the parks. Like, everybody's rooting for it.
Yeah.
Even the fans are rooting for it. But I think the fact that covering Disney or being a Disney fan for people that are watching, it is like sports. There's always a headline. There's always something that's contentious. There's always my team versus your team. And I think overall that just goes to show how strong the product is, because all of those arguments are based on passion.
Right.
And like the scuttlebug about Tiana's Bayou Adventure and Splash Mountain and this, that, and the other, that goes to show a customer base that even though I swore it off, I'm never going again, they still love it. They're still watching the videos. They're still reading the articles. They're still arguing about it. It's sports, The amount of times that my father-in-law says he's going to give up on the Buffalo Bills, he'll still be there Sunday at 1 o'clock watching.
Yeah, right. I know. I grew up a Chiefs fan. I said that all the time.
Hey, now you have your turn.
And then I was miserable the whole time. And for a few years, I get a little glimpse of fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Get to know what it's like to be on that side of things.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. And look, the parks aren't perfect. The people aren't perfect. And you'll talk to cast members who are like, I love Disney a lot more before I worked here.
Yeah, that's to be
stuff
accepted.
like that. But they're talking about the business Disney, the corporation, as opposed to like the experience of going to Disney or being part of the magic. I think most people like it when they're in the magic. I realize a lot of the cast members have to deal with some really profoundly stupid people every day.
Yes.
And that's got to get old.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of them, they're like, it doesn't even register for them anymore. They're like, something that dumb happens 5 times a day now.
Yeah, I have a good friend who's a top level VIP tour guide, and his job is to basically be everybody's best friend when they're at Disneyland.
Yeah.
Ride the rides with them, give them the fun facts, make sure everything that they need is taken care of. And I also have the privilege just to go there with him when he's on his time in the park.
Right.
And I always use him as a model of, this guy works here, he does all this every single day, but when he comes into that front gate with the Air Jordans on and just taking it at his own speed, he still allows himself to be a fan. And I think that's important, to give yourself the grace to be like, this is still a happy place. And I think you make that decision. Do you want to keep it as a happy place, or do you want to let that be like every other part of your life where you just look at all the bad things and hyper focus on that?
Yeah, I mean, we tend to, right? We have more access than we've ever had to information about things. And some of it is misinformation, or, how many myths about the park have you been able to debunk just by doing that? You've heard that were interesting stories that made you go, oh, that's really cool. Yeah. And then you realize through some research, like, oh, that's not true at all.
Yeah, all roads lead to folklore.
Right. We took a fireworks cruise a while back. The boat the captain of the pontoon boat, I guess. He was great. He had some great stories, but a lot of stories I'm like, not true.
Yeah.
Exaggeration, misunderstanding, sort of true, But I still like that you're willing to suspend your disbelief for a little while and just listen to someone spin a yarn, understanding it's kind of harmless whether or not what you're talking about or not, or that you just have a more interesting version of something. They're entertaining people.
But you and I have done the research. We've put in our 10,000 hours, and we'll hear the story and be like, well, that's kind of a half-truth. It didn't really work that way, but yeah, that's cool. But you got to think about the average Disneyland vacationer or Disney World vacationer saw somebody with a badge on that said their name and said Magic Kingdom, and this guy's driving the boat. So if he tells you that's the way that it was designed or that's the way that it worked, that is now fact to your family.
Right.
And you will die on a hill, be like, no, man, I talked to a guy that worked at the park. He told me this is how they built Big Thunder Mountain or whatever it is. So when I hear those, I'm like, just have that. You know what I mean? Like, just have that version.
I've heard some whoppers.
Oh, big time, man. Big time.
It's okay though. Sometimes it's fun.
Yeah, I mean
It's about fantasy.
it is, and it's fun too. Like the last one that I debunked in my oddity series was, is Tom Sawyer Island a part of Missouri? And because so many people don't understand sarcasm. Like sarcasm is very much lost on half the population. Right. And so when the governor of Missouri sent a letter out that said, how dare you, if you're going to build a Tom Sawyer Island, that's rightful property of the state of Missouri. That's our favorite son. And he's just, busting balls with the governor of California. But some people go, no, man. The governor wrote a letter. Like that's law now, because they don't get sarcasm. So it's just fun how many different versions of the same story are out there. And I think that's why the Haunted Mansion is one of the most popular attractions, because it is a choose your own adventure of stories.
Which story do you want to believe, right? Think about it. All the lore of the Haunted Mansion, all the characters. Some of these have been created by fans over the years. Some have been kind of, I guess, kind of retconned, where they've added the story later just to make it more interesting to the place. And it has this mythology all unto its own. I think it's great. Yeah,
and when you look back at early storylines that they started and then they bailed on, but some of those ideas are still implemented in there, and then trying to tether it into Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, I think so many people love it and it's perfect also for its theme of being a haunted house on the edge of town.
Yeah.
Because it's just all folklore.
Yeah.
It's like what your older brother told you, and then it became a law to you and your buds,
Word traveled different when we were growing up, too.
You think?
You know what I mean? I think of all the things that every kid my age knew in 1985 when we had no internet.
Yeah.
And you'd go, it didn't matter where you went. Someone would have a story that was similar to that. Someone would start telling you about, their mom was on the elevator and someone got on. It turned out it was Eddie Murphy. I heard this story every town I lived in from every kid I met, and the same thing with Disneyland lore, right? There's so many stories out there, and a lot of them were told by tour guides.
Yeah.
Just because it was told to you by a tour guide doesn't mean it's true.
People see that name tag, though, and now it has a lot of authority.
Right.
And I think it's kind of fun that way.
Yeah.
That there's are so many stories. And when I've started to do my deep dive on learning more about Walt Disney World, it only shows me how much deeper the mythology around Disneyland is.
Yeah.
Because Disneyland is created in a time where there's not good record keeping, not good photos, not a ton of footage. And Walt Disney World, they kind of had an idea of where they're going and what they were doing and documenting things. And it's a little bit harder to dig around here to find some of those stories. But when you find them, it's fun to learn these things.
You'll hear some good ones.
Oh, yeah. Like my one that I'm focused on right now that I'm doing research on is that basically EPCOT was like a dare build because of an article that came out in Playboy magazine, where a young journalist wrote an article for Playboy magazine that basically said, Card Walker doesn't know how to build an EPCOT and doesn't know what an EPCOT is. And that made Card very angry. And he was like, we're going to build that thing. If they don't think I can do it, I'm going to build it to prove them wrong. And so basically like vibrato and male ego got somebody into like, I'm going to see this thing through and build some sort of version of this because somebody told me that I can't.
I have never heard that EPCOT was a Card Walker vanity project.
Yeah. And from everybody on the inside said he didn't really understand it. And we had to like break it down to him in visual learning and really kind of explain to him what it could be and what it would be and how we would take Walt's big idea and, let's take the mall, let's carve the mall off and make that the World Showcase. Like, how can we dumb it down and actually make it possible?
Yeah.
And we're saying dumb down. And we just talked about earlier, it was the biggest construction project in history, of that time period. And that was that was EPCOT Light. So it just goes to show what a big idea that Walt had.
I talked to a couple Imagineers that were involved in the WESTCOT project.
Oh, my. Let me talk to them.
And what they told me was they didn't like it. They're like, it was just going to be a big shopping destination. It was going to be all for shopping and dining. It was going to be a big cash grab. But when I thought about what we talked about, Spaceship Earth is, I think it's 189 feet tall.
Something like that. Yeah.
So let's just say 190 feet, 180. Let's say 180 feet. Maybe it's 180 feet. I should know this. I do know this. I just can't. I'm drawing a blank. The sphere at WESTCOT was going to be 300 feet tall.
Yeah.
So it's over 100 feet taller. But if Jason Diffendahl went to MIT, he knows math. I go, what is the volume? How much more volume is that?
Oh, wow.
He showed me like pi r squared, whatever, calculate the volume of a sphere. 14 times the volume of Spaceship Earth.
I can't wait to ride that ride.
It's hard to wrap your mind. I mean, obviously there's going to be a million things there. It's hard to wrap your mind around how much bigger than Spaceship Earth that would be in the end.
So I go to EPCOT for the first time in 2021. And I had seen photos of Spaceship Earth my entire life. One of my memories as a kid is seeing Mickey Mouse on top waving and going, that looks terrifying. And so you kind of can't not see it. So I kind of like went up and turned my back to it and spun around. But when you finally get to stand in front of Spaceship Earth, it is unbelievably big. You can't stop staring at it. It's like a magic trick. Thinking about that being 300 feet, which, by the way, that is the absolute height limit for construction in Anaheim. Mm-hmm. They're allowed to do that once in Disneyland, once in DCA, and then the height for the Toy Story parking lot will be smaller than that. I believe it's 225 feet. But something that big would just be absolutely insane.
Be pretty garish.
Yeah, I don't think that, is the Shanghai Castle better because it's bigger? My answer is no, because when you look at the Shanghai Castle, you can kind of see a cube shape in the middle of it within the turret sticking off of it. I don't need a Walmart castle.
Yeah. Imagine being that close to Space Station Earth, I think they were going to call it.
Yeah.
Imagine being that close to the Crystal Cathedral and being the tackiest building around.
There was one thing in WESTCOT, though. There's always one little thing that grabs your imagination that you can't let go of. And for me was, because I'm a big transportation guy, it was going to have a boat ride. It was kind of going to go around the entire thing. And it was going to clock in at something like 22 minutes. It would be the longest Disney ride ever.
22-minute boat ride, I'm in.
Oh, dude, all day long. Sounds like a lazy river. And that was the part that, because imagine if a boat actually went through World Showcase. You know, we kind of got to go through the different pavilions and see how that would have just been fantastic.
It's like the Opryland Hotel in Nashville. Have you ever been there? That's called the Gaylord Opryland. They have these giant atriums. Like we have a Gaylord Palms here with one atrium. They have multiple atriums in Nashville, but they have boats going through and waterfall. It's crazy.
I've seen YouTube content. My friend Adam's done the one here, and I was going to the airport and I looked over at the Gaylord here. I'm like, oh, that's that Bizarro Hotel. That thing is huge.
I've stayed there.
Yeah.
And I've also stayed at the Gaylord Texan, which is pretty much identical to the Gaylord Palms in layout. It just has Texas areas built inside it instead of Florida areas. So where we might have an old fort, they have like an oil derrick.
Wow.
You know, or where we have, I don't know, a sailboat in a Key West area, they have a ranch area or something like that. But, these places are massive and they're cool because they theme them. But the one in Nashville is insane.
Do people still do sort of mom and pop side of the road, so Gaylord has like at least 3 locations that I'm learning about.
Oh, they have the Rockies too.
Is that still happening today? I mean, I know Netflix is getting into live entertainment with Netflix House. They're going to have 2 locations popping up soon. But I don't know if that type of stuff is still happening, or is that a part of Americana that's lost forever?
I mean, I think what you'll find in our economy, our global economy, is that what you think are a lot of different competitors are really all the same people.
Yeah.
So whether that's a rental car company, you're like, I'm not going to Enterprise, I'm going to National. And they're like, well, we own Enterprise, and National, and Alamo, and everybody else. Or I think most eyewear is all really made by Luxottica. That a lot of these hotel chains have, more than 5 or 6 brands under them. I know like Rosen. Rosen's Shingle Creek is a big hotel. Rosen Plaza, Rosen Inn. Locally, he has the School of Hospitality at UCF is named after a man named Rosen. That is still, I think, like kind of a family thing that's very successful, but it's limited in this area. I don't know. The days of you starting the Brickeyland hotel and then growing a chain across the country is you need a lot of capital. You need a lot of safety net.
Yeah.
And I think maybe those days are, we'll see them, but they're few and far between.
Yeah, when you look at the birth of both Disneyland and Walt Disney World, it just would be impossible to acquire land like they did and to find properties that are in the middle of nowhere that haven't been touched, that have sort of a secrecy to them. All of this was really done at a magical time in American history. And I think that is a big part of the charm of these properties.
I mean, now you'd have to go out into the desert, maybe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of land out in the desert. I wouldn't advise it. But like even Lookout, we just went to Lookout Key at Lighthouse Point, the new Disney Island destination. It's not a full island, right? Disney only has a portion of an existing island that they're using for that. And the Castaway Key is its own island.
Right.
But the reality is all the private islands are getting scooped up in the Bahamas. There's no, you got to work with what you can find.
When you look at a place like Dubai, where it takes tremendous amount of money to convert that city into what they're doing with it, it's not feasible for most people to be able to do what they've been able to do out there with all the architecture and like truly innovative things that they've done out there. So I think that these two parks or these two properties really sit in sort of a magical time in the history of our country. And it's even better that they kind of reflect the country in that moment, like the optimism of America that I don't know that a lot of people maybe feel as much today as they did in 55 or 71. So they're just kind of bizarrely time capsules in every single way, even though Walt Disney World didn't get its time capsule.
Right. I think it's fair to say, too, that these things, when they happen differently. People play it safe more.
Yeah.
Because more of this money is corporate or shareholder, publicly owned companies, and they're very focused on getting their quarterly returns. So the idea that Walt Disney could have gone to a bunch of shareholders in the 1950s and said, all right, well, we're just going to not make money for a while because I'm going to build this thing called Disneyland. And they're like, what is that? And he's like, it's kind of like a state fair, but nicer.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think they got it, right?
No.
He was inventing sort of a new industry. He was taking an industry that existed and really turning it on its head. And Roy was running around doing what he could to get money from people, whether it be sponsors or banks or anywhere else, to try to make this thing happen. I think something like that, this outside of the box thinking, would be a lot harder to do now because people want to play it safe with their money. Right? They're like, you know what? We could build a pretty big, ostentatious, amazing building for Communicore Hall, but nobody ever lost their job for staying status quo. So let's just build something that will fit our needs, and we can dress it up a little bit and move on to the next project.
Yeah, I think that the next thing that feels like Disneyland, there's a 10-year-old somewhere who's going to build it in virtual reality.
Right.
I do believe that with where that technology is going and how there's generations of people that putting something on their head doesn't bother them.
Yeah.
Screens don't intimidate them. And I think that there's going to probably be some place that's really full of escapism that you can go to without leaving your home. I just can't see.
Look, Disney's big on them. They were big on the metaverse thing for a while. Chapek went crazy talking about the metaverse and
Chapek.
Oh, that guy.
What a guy. What a hero.
But you're right. I mean, that's something that someone can do.
Yeah.
And it's not going to, I don't think the investment will be as big because land is finite.
Yeah.
Right? Our natural resources are finite and the prices of them fluctuate. I don't know that a little bit more hard drive space to build your Minecraft world or whatever you want to do is can be limited.
Well, the reason why I picked that as the destination for the next big idea is because Disneyland was both big and small in its stakes. It was accomplishable. Basically a family company built it.
Right.
And, the fact that they would go on to build this place debt-free, they never took out a loan for Walt Disney World, is mind-blowing if you know anything about business. Right. And so I kind of feel like for somebody to be truly inventive, the stakes need to be smaller so that the risk reward, you know what I mean? You have to have that little bit of, you can't be held back by, because lawyers are always going to tell you no. And investors are always going to tell you, are you sure about that? Right. And those voices inside of your head don't give birth to creativity. Walt was already a made man. He's like, I'm going to do this no matter what anybody tells me, and I'm willing to put up anything I can. My health every hour I have in the day. I mean, one of my favorite things about going to Palm Springs is looking at his old house and be like, that's the house that built Disneyland, because selling that house gave him enough money to build Disneyland. And what a wife. You sold our vacation home to build a carnival? Have you lost your mind, Walt?
I mean, the risks that he took in his life and career are remarkable. And there are not that many people that you can say really did something to change the world.
Yeah.
Right? I've resigned myself to the fact that I could do things that people care about or things that people don't care about, but I'm not going to change the world. Walt Disney changed the world. There's almost no corner of the globe you can go to where you show a Mickey Mouse and nobody knows what that is, right? And that came at great, taking great personal risk. Yeah. Whether that means you get on a train and just go to California because you believe in something, which admittedly millions of people have done since then, and had mixed results there. But like for Walt to believe in what he had so much to go out there with nothing and create this thing, who would have ever thought that now the studio is hoping the theme parks are doing well to keep them afloat,
Yeah, and the theme park, the bizarre idea that he had has been such a cornerstone of the Disney Corporation because it makes money every single day. So what is it? John Carter to Mars. Mm-hmm. We spend a lot of money. We sweep it underneath the rug. Yep. Doesn't matter because people are still riding Space Mountain. Are still going to the park, still booking hotels. And, even Disney, when they build Walt Disney World, they didn't own a hotel yet. Yeah. Disneyland Hotel was still managed outside of the company.
By the one guy, I forgot the family's name. But.
Yeah, and so they come out here and they're like, not only are we going to build our second theme park, but we're going to figure out how to run hotels that we're building. And, most hotels, it's like a gradient. The hotel pops up. Some people stay there. Oh, we liked it. More families show up. They opened these hotels pegged at 100% capacity out of the gate. Yeah. So they never even had really a time to figure out how to get it all going. It was just boots on the ground. I love the photos of Walt Disney World where the bell tower says, don't forget, we're opening October 1st. Yeah. Like just that reminder that you would see every day when you went into work from the Main Street train station. Like, don't forget, this is our deadline.
You know who worked at the Contemporary on day one?
No.
George Kalogridis.
Who is that?
Oh, he's like an executive at Disneyland. I think he's semi-retired now.
Oh, okay.
I mean, he's a legendary figure within the Walt Disney Company. But yeah, it's a young man. He worked at the Contemporary on day one. There's all those stories of Dick Nunis and everyone else putting down the sod on the last night.
Green side up.
Yeah. How do you lay sod? Green side up.
I just read Dick Nunis's book.
Yeah.
I've been going more into like the management of Disney, trying to get that perspective of it because I've spent a lot of my research focusing on the Imagineering and creative side. And I felt like to get the true story, I would also need to know the business side of things.
Yeah.
So I've been doing a lot of research in that world. And sometimes it's a little bit like, what am I reading? But there are chicken nuggets in there that are like, oh, whoa, that's cool. Never thought about it coming from there.
Mark, I could talk to you all day.
Let's do it.
We're going to have to do it another time.
I love this, man. This is such a fun part of my trip.
We have to wrap up, but I really appreciate you coming in, man.
This is great, man.
I couldn't thank you enough for coming again. And I'm going to be hopefully out to Disneyland soon. Maybe we can hang out.
Let's do it.
My magic key runs out in a couple months here, so...
Let's do it. Let's do it on that last little bit of magic. We'll squeeze it out.
The last little bit of magic. For those of you that are still here, and thanks for watching. I am outfitted in this glorious shirt that we have commissioned and made. It's made by our friends at Park Candy. Their wonderful fabric that they use, and their designs are great. And you can learn how to get this shirt. You can go to wwnt.link/ oh wait, that's the Park Candy one. wwnt.link/Park Candy, or if you go to parkcandy.com and you use the code WDWNT at checkout, you get 15% off. Or to buy this bad boy, we sell this one. This is shop.wdwnt.com or wdwnt.shop. Just pick one. I don't know. You'll find it. Carousel Products might have it by now. I don't know.
You know what we call that where I come from?
A shirt.
That's a blouse.
A blouse.
Yeah, a Brickey blouse.
A Brickey blouse. I don't know. I like it. It's comfortable. They're good. Anyway, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time right here on the WDW News Today podcast. And you say see you real soon.
See you real soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.